was only between France and Vietnam. The largest issue was that France had control of Vietnam from the late 1800s to 1940. In 1940, Japan had taken control of Vietnam and allowed them to become communist. The Vietnamese people did not want to be under anyone's control, so they began running protests, riots, and started their own organizations. In 1942, Ho Chi Minh began to organize the Vietnamese people that fled to China. Minh was a very well-known communist organizational leader. During one of his Vietnam War riots, Ho Chi Minh once said, "If ever the tiger pauses, the elephant will impale him on his mighty tusk. But the tiger will not pause, and the elephant will die of exhaustion and blood loss." Finally, on September 2nd, 1945, Vietnam had gotten what it wanted. They were officially an independent nation. The joy only lasted a few months. By the end of 1945, French troops had moved back into Vietnam and took control of the southern part, causing anger, chaos, and a war to begin. This war was one of the most fought wars. The United States drafted nearly 500,000 people. South and North Vietnam put together had 577,000 people fighting for them. The Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975. This war was nearly 20 years long. American citizens had great debate over joining the war. The separate sides were known as the Doves and Hawks. The Doves were Americans that did not see a reason to join the war. Americans that saw a reason to fight and protect were known as Hawks. The U.S. was split and would have to decide soon. Despite all the Doves' requests and arguments, America joined the war efforts in 1950. No one would have thought the Vietnamese soldiers would have been as strong as they were. The Vietnamese independence annihilated French forces at Dien Bien Phu in May 1954. Vietnamese people rebelled against Ngo Diem in South Vietnam in October 1957, ordering to be free once again, and they wanted it for a longer time period than before. They were angry with the U.S. for joining the war and fighting against them, so they began to show their aggravations. On August 2, 1964, the United States was attacked. The U.S. destroyer Maddox was bombarded and completely destroyed. 2 days later, President Johnson released the news to Americans. After the release of this news, he ordered airstrikes to the north part of Vietnam that would start immediately. It wasn't until the following year, in 1965, that the U.S. actually sent Marines to Vietnam. After many battles and devastations, President Johnson was worried about going further into national debt. So in 1967, President Johnson asked for a tax increase to help fight the war. Many American people were angered by the president. Most citizens did not even think there was a need for us to be in this war. But Johnson pushed for the tax to increase. He believed that this war could help with our economic health and growth. The draft during this war was one of the largest in the United States history. The Vietnam War had a great movement on women's rights. This war was the first war to draft women and actually have them fighting in battle. Over 10,000 women helped the U.S. fight in the war. It lasted from 1967 to 1970s. Between 1961 and 1967, over 16,000 Americans died fighting in this war.